me today to introduce this new game is Ellen Burns-Johnson, lead game designer here at eLearning. So without further ado, I will let Ellen take over.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar today. Thanks for joining. If you're in costume, that's great. I want to see those pictures up on social media sometime later today. Just doing a quick double check. Can you see my screen share right now, Stephanie,
Yes.
can you see that? Okay, great. So we're gonna bounce around through a couple different screens today, because what I'd like to do is first show you a little bit about Noodle. I'll show you the game, and I built a game for today's session. And then I'd also like to kind of take us through the process of making a game, along with some best practices and some tips and tricks. And then we can end with Q&A. As Stephanie said, we've got the Q&A panel open, so if you have questions and if you have anything you want to talk about, hit those panels up and tell us what you think. Okay, so quick for today's session, just in a little bit more detail, I've got a Noodle game for us to play together, and we'll use the chat window for that. Then I have a little bit of a review about some possible instructional applications for Noodle as a game. You can use it in a few different ways, and we'll talk about what those ways are. Then we're going to be looking at the CMS. So if you are a subscriber, you're familiar with the Training Arcade CMS. You might not have looked into Noodle specifically, but we'll look at that right now. And if you're not a subscriber, this is a good tour of the system, so you'll get a sense of what it means to have access to that and what it means to be able to build a game. And then we'll leave 15 minutes or 10 to 15 minutes of time for Q&A at the end of the session today. Okay, so just a little bit about Noodle. As you might know, eLearning, we do the kind of soup to nuts when it comes to learning, design, and development. Noodle is part of our catalog of gamification and game design offerings. So the Training Arcade is our software as a service platform, where you can use our game templates to bring your own content and make your own games. In addition to that, we also do custom game development, and we like to bring the expertise that we have gained in that space to the Training Arcade as a platform, so that you can build your own games without necessarily having to go through the entire effort of doing your own project. So that's where Noodle comes from. And if you've ever played Wordle, which is a New York Times game, you'll probably be familiar with the game mechanics. So it's a word guessing game. It's a puzzle game based on words, but there are some extended features that we've added into Noodle to make it more helpful for instructional designers, for trainers, and for learners. So some of those features include, we give limited tries, although that's kind of familiar. The number of tries that you get is dependent on the length of the words. You can use different lengths of words, anywhere from 3 letters to 7 letters. You're not just locked into that 5-letter standard. We have points, we have places for feedback, we have a hint mechanic, and we also have leaderboards that you can play with as a designer. And of course, everything has got noodly art. And the reason we did that is because we like noodles, and also because there's this play on the phrase, it's going to bake your noodle. So if something really makes you think, it bakes your noodle, and we wanted to just kind of play with that a little bit. Okay, so that's kind of the background of Noodle. And I'm going to share a link with you all in chat. And I will also share the game on screen so you can see what we're doing. Give me one moment. All right, I'm going to switch my screen share, and then I will also share the link. All right, can everyone see a Noodle screen?
Yes,
in dark
we
mode.
can.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to share this link in chat to everybody. And if you want to just play along with us, we won't take too many minutes, but you'll have this link that you can play afterwards. And then you can go ahead and play with that on your own time or as we go along. Okay, so if you're going to play as a group, then go ahead and you can just follow me as we're continuing the game. So I'm just going to type in Burns E for my initials. So if we're playing together, actually we can just change this to webinar group. and then we'll submit that. So what happens is those initials or that phrase will be our name on the leaderboard, just like an old school arcade. You have to type in your initials to be at the top. And then here are our instructions. So we've also got some sound we can turn on. You guys hearing the music?
We are not, because you
Okay.
probably didn't share your computer audio when you shared the screen,
Okay.
but I believe you.
Okay, that's fine. We can skip that for now. You guys have the link if you want to go to the website yourself. You can turn the music on and off. You can toggle light and dark themes if you want. We also have a custom theme that we call Tea House that you can turn on as an author, and we can look at that later. So I'm going to close this. Some basic settings. We've got the rules of the game. You make a guess by guessing one letter at a time. Here are some examples to help you learn the rules, and then the extended set of rules for everyone who has to know everything behind the scenes. When it comes to the actual game, this is what we're seeing. So I'm going to toggle the light theme on, so it's probably easier to see for people who are following along. What I've done here is I've created a very short game with just a few puzzles, all on the topic of cybersecurity. So what you have here, you've got categories, and those are kind of the domain of knowledge. You've got a prompt, which is a phrase or a question that kind of nudges the learner towards the answer to the puzzle. And then you have the puzzle itself. So you can see this puzzle has 4 squares. It's only 4 letters. And we can enter our guess either by typing just by hand. If you're on mobile, you can just use your screen to input letters, or you can use your keyboard. So I'm going to pause here and let you all look at this for a moment, just the category and the prompt. Does anyone have any guesses they want to put forth? This is a pretty tough puzzle, I think. Anyone have any guesses? If you do, put it in the chat.
Now, Ellen, do you have a strategy? Like, I know a lot of people have their specific letters they like to always try first when they're playing a certain other similar game that I will not name here.
Yeah, so that's a good one. Because the word length is variable with Noodle, the same strategies don't always work. So when I'm playing a 5-letter game, I usually start with the word crane because it has a lot of these common words or common letters in that one word. Obviously, that won't fit here, right? That doesn't work. Now, so what we've done as the designers and developers is we've kind of made the interface more open. So whereas in some of these games you can't actually submit a guess unless your word is actually in the dictionary, we wanted to make it more flexible so that your content will work with the game no matter how many acronyms or weird specific industry specific terminology you have. Even if it's jargon, it will work with the game. So you can type in whatever letters you want, but it'll only get you as far as you're able to strategize with your guess. All right, so Dwight is asking, he's suggesting disc. That's a really good guess. Okay. All right, so we've got some information from the game. It looks like D, I, and K are not in the word, but the letter S is. It's just not in that location. So I'm going to guess edge. See if you guys get any more information from that. Oh, nope. I'm being mean because I wrote this puzzle. Yeah.
I was going to guess chat, but now that I know there's an S in it, my guess is clearly wrong.
Well, and this is the fun part, right? You can guess it and then get some more information about the word. Let's see what that tells us. Okay. So while you guys are puzzling over additional things to guess with this particular game, I'm going to talk a little bit about what's happening from the learner's, with the psychological perspective as someone's puzzling through this, right? So let's imagine for a second that we went through cybersecurity training in the last week or so. This is a follow-up training that maybe our training team sent out to the company a few days afterwards, just as a refresher. I know that it's going to relate to something that I learned in my class or in my e-learning. What I'm doing here is I'm trying to think of all the different things that might relate to that training and this specific prompt, and that'll fit into this four-letter word puzzle. And that's helping the learner's brain engage on a whole bunch of different cylinders and trying to look at relationships between things, which is one of the ways that you can create an activity to help things become a little bit stickier, right? One of the things that helps our memory of a thing become stronger is we connect it to other pieces of information that are elsewhere in memory. And that is one of the great things about puzzle games, is that it kind of builds upon those connections and strengthens them. All right, do you guys want a clue?
I have a new guess if no
Okay,
one else wants to guess, or we can do the hint.
we can also do the hint.
Let's do the hint.
Okay, let's do the hint. Let's see what it's going to give us. One letter. We have one hint remaining for this puzzle because it's such a short word. All right, so the first letter is an A.
Oh, well, now my guess is also wrong again. Just so everyone knows, I didn't see any of Ellen's games before she created.
I'm so evil.
Oh, Bridget. Bridget is probably right. Should
Bridget
we?
is guessing apps. Let's see what Bridget has.
Woo!
Yay, you did it. Nice work. Okay, now based on how well we did get different things in our bowl. Here we took quite a large percentage of the number of tries that we had to guess this particular puzzle, so we don't get a very exciting bowl. Yeah, SAS would be a good one too. Oh, that would have been awesome. Would have been a good guess. Why didn't you say that first, Stephanie?
Well, I didn't think of it until we tried chat, and then there was the A and the S, and I was like, oh, SAS. Then we did the hint, and I saw that the word did not start with S, so I was like, well, there goes all my guesses.
All right, well, we got a couple more tries, and I think I made 4 puzzles for this. I'd like to only take us through 3, just so you guys can see a little bit about how the categories work, and then we'll move on to the rest of the content of the webinar. Okay. Ooh, Jennifer asked API, but I have 2 people in chat saying VPN, Tiffany and Bridget. So let's start with the majority and see what VPN gets us. I'm saying this like I don't know what the answer is. So now, because we got it on the first try, we get the full bowl of ramen, and we get all the points that we can possibly earn for that particular puzzle. Nice guesses, guys. This is good. So these are pretty basic questions, right? I think this is pretty basic topic or content for this particular topic. But what I'm trying to showcase here is the flexibility, right? First one, we had apps, short for application. Everyone says apps. Only a few people say application. VPN, that's an abbreviation. It still works, right? It doesn't have to be the full word spelled out. Common abbreviations are a great opportunity to take advantage of the flexibility of the game and get some of those shorter puzzles in there. I think that actually the shorter puzzles are harder because you have fewer tries. Okay. Now you can see we've got a different category, right? So we're still in the idea, this whole overarching topic of cybersecurity, but now we're looking at a slightly different domain. And so by using the categories and the prompts and then the puzzle, we're really helping to kind of create these schema in the learner's mind that kind of organizes this information and makes it easier to recall, not just for training purposes, but also on the job. All right, so we've got Christy guessing fish. Any other guesses? Going once? Going twice? Okay, let's go with fish.
Geniuses. We just have geniuses on this call.
People with very secure systems.
Gold stars for everyone in their cybersecurity.
Okay, so I'm going to skip past this next one. I'm just going to type in this last one so you guys can see the leaderboard, just so you know what that looks like. And then we'll talk a little bit about how the game can be used, and then we'll actually work on creating a game together. Okay, so I'm going to click continue. We've played 4 out of 4 puzzles. We've solved all the puzzles, so we've got 4 filled bowls. There we go. Okay, so we've got play again, log out, leaderboard. Looks like webinar group is us. Bernsey was me earlier, and I didn't actually finish the puzzle. And then I see a couple of you have logged on and started playing as well. So feel free to share this if you'd like to. We'll keep the game open for another few weeks, just so you can try it out. And that's just again our demo game. It's only 4 puzzles long. You can create a game that's much longer, and we can look at that a little bit when we get into the CMS. All right, I am going to stop my screen share. I can find the Zoom thingy.
I can stop you, I think.
I think I got it.
Great.
Okay, so I think one of the immediate and most apparent uses for a game like this is as a knowledge check, right? So as we were going through that game, I was talking about how we might imagine this is something that's sent out as a follow-up to a training that happened earlier. That is, I think, a pretty easy use case, right? Knowledge check. You can interleave it between modules within a training, maybe an e-learning. You can take some breaks during an instructor-led session to play a game or send out a link to a game when you're giving people a lunch break or a 15-minute leg stretch if you're in a virtual experience. Knowledge check is a pretty straightforward application of this type of game. But there are a few other things that you can think about when it comes to instructional applications for Noodle. One is, instead of thinking of it as a check, think of it as reinforcement. So instead of just making sure people know it and they can solve it and they know the answers to things, you can send it out at certain periods after training to kind of fight against that forgetting curve. If you're familiar with the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, it means after the event where new learning has happened, your recollection of the event and what you learned there kind of quickly drops off, unless you have something that forces you to recall that information, that skill, or that experience. Then it'll bring it back up, and you'll strengthen your memories with each repeated repetition or recollection. So you can plan that for your learners by sending out some post-training materials. Maybe it's a PDF, maybe it's a piece of performance support, and it could be a game. So that's one potential use. Increasing engagement, there are lots of ways to share materials, but people are more likely to do something that they find fun. And so this is a way to just get people engaged in some of that reinforcement or that refreshment for training, or to maybe increase their curiosity or their engagement leading up to a training event. And I'll have more on that in a moment. Having more touch points. One of the things that's fantastic about this game, and I think the genre of games that it comes from, is that they're really short. So my husband and I, one of the first things we do every morning, we make coffee, we let the dogs out, and then we do our puzzle games. And we're always texting back and forth like, okay, I got this one in this many tries, and I got this one in this many tries. We've been absolutely loving the New York Times categories game lately, and he's way better at it than I am. But I'm better at the word games. So takes 5 minutes of our morning, and it's this brief shared experience that creates some connection, and creates a little moment where we can kind of bond and just have a little fun. And you can lean on that kind of experience for your learners as well, right? If you send this out ahead of time before training, or maybe once a month or once a week, you're creating that shared experience. You're creating that water cooler style moment that gives people something to talk about and something to just laugh about and experience together. So having more touch points is another way that you can use this kind of micro-learning style game. And then circling back to something I've mentioned a couple times, building curiosity. And I think this is a place where games are kind of underutilized, and that is in pre-training, like preparation for a training. So let's imagine you have a big class coming up. You've got a big instructor-led session. Maybe people are coming in from off-site, so there's a lot of expense involved. Or maybe it's a multi-hour or multi-day series of webinars or a conference. Sending out some material ahead of time, especially stuff that's really engaging and kind of fun, that gets people thinking about what they will learn and can build their curiosity so that they're more prepared to take in information and to fully engage in the experience that you've prepared for them. So I think games as a whole are generally underutilized in that aspect. Noodle specifically is, again, great for that because it's short and because the game mechanics are pretty low stakes and pretty familiar. So it's easier for people to pick up, easy for them to play, and they don't feel like they're being asked to learn a whole new gaming system in order to participate. So those are some of the applications. I'm going to pause here for a drink of water. Stephanie, do you want to remind everybody of the questions and the chat features, just in case they have anything that's bubbling up while we're talking?
Yeah, so if you have any questions about the game, put those in the Q&A and we will answer as many as we can during the webinar. I know probably we'll have some more questions once we get into precisely how to build the Noodle game. That's when typically we get the most questions.
For
And
sure.
feel free to leave your comments in the chat as well.
Okay, we are to that point in the webinar, right? How to create a game of Noodle. So there are, I think, a few questions that that come up pretty frequently. One of them is, does it work with an LMS? And the answer is yes. So anything that's on the training arcade can be downloaded as a SCORM package and then uploaded to an LMS. And the data, the nuanced data will still link out to the training arcade, so you can see that in the dashboard. But the actual launch and the completion will be tracked through your LMS. So there's our first question and our first answer. And I can show you what that looks like in the platform in a moment. Couple of questions that come up pretty frequently in addition to, does it work with an LMS? First off, how do you think about a category versus a prompt? That's kind of I think a higher level game design question. I can touch on that briefly just to kind of talk through how we planned it when we were creating the game. Some other questions that come up are, what if my word is longer than 7 letters? Do all prompts need to be formatted the same way? How do we deal with numbers? So on and so forth. And I have one really high level, very easy answer for you to lean on if you when we get to that point. For now, just briefly, talking about categories versus prompts. So I touched on this briefly as we were going through the example game, but when we think about a category, we're really thinking about kind of a domain of knowledge. So we think back to our cybersecurity example, the whole game was about cybersecurity, just like you might have a whole curriculum about cybersecurity. Then you subdivide that curriculum into different areas or topics or domains to make it easier to create learning for those different pieces, and B, easier to remember and to learn itself. There might be related skills and attitudes that you want to connect to those domains or topics, and that makes sense. That's why you group them. Category is about grouping. So within your game about cybersecurity, you might touch on things like methods of hacking methods or techniques. You might touch on like avenues of risk. You might touch on, information hygiene or managing your workspace. Those could all be topics or categories within a single game about an overarching topic. Then within that category, you'll have prompts about the specific questions, right? So we had 2 prompts, I think, about the category of risk. So one of them was about how apps, especially public-facing web apps, can be an avenue for risk, an attack vector, I guess. And then the second question was about VPNs, right? So lots of organizations they have VPNs that employees might need to log into in order to access certain tools or information. If you're not keeping your workspace very well secured, then you might enable someone to get access to that VPN, in which case they have access to that secure information, and that's no good for anyone except for the hacker. So this is how we kind of organize the game, prompt and category. In the future, one of the things that we're working on is creating some category level tracking. So our roadmap involves building out some of the analytics so that you can actually see how your learners are performing, not just prompt by prompt or question by question, but also in a category. So that kind of would let you see what areas of a curriculum might be giving people the most trouble, where you might benefit from some follow-up training as an organization, and just give you some more data to work with so you can make better decisions for you, your organization, and your learning audience. So that's question number 1. The next questions, 2, 3, and 4, I kind of want to give you like a little cheat code for, because these are actually some of the toughest ones on a case-by-case basis. Trying to figure out how to phrase a prompt in a way that makes sense can take a lot of time. We have tools available to us that help reduce writing time. And so one of the things I want to take you through today is how you can use a chat bot like ChatGPT or Bing Chat, or maybe Writer.com if you're using some of the other tools that are out there. I want to give you some guidance on how you can use these chat bots to create puzzles with your own content. So this can work for if you've got source content with lots of words that are longer than 7 letters. You can lean on AI to help you rephrase questions or rephrase things and give you ideas for words that will fit into a puzzle. You can ask ChatGPT or similar chatbots to rephrase content for you so that it fits within a specific type of phrase, if that's something that you want to do. And of course, with numbers, you can always spell them out. Okay, so this is a prompt that I wrote to work with Noodle, and I'll paste it in the chat in a moment so that you can just grab it and go with it and keep it for yourself. But basically, you can take this prompt, you can copy it into whatever chatbot you'd like, and then you kind of fill in the blanks and you fill in some of the variables here, and then you give it some source content, and you can paste that source content in. Maybe you take some information, you put it into something like Google Docs, and you change the things that are proprietary so that they are no longer proprietary, if that's a concern. And then you can put that source content right in there. And your chatbot will help you draft some initial questions that you can use as prompts for your game. And this can really help speed up the game development process. The process or the game that I built at the beginning of the webinar, it took me maybe 10 minutes between going to ChatGPT, drafting out some questions, putting it in the platform, and then launching the game. It was 10 to 15 minutes. So it's definitely something you can create a lot of games for people if you want to create a workflow like that. So my question for you is, if we're going to make a game together, which is the next step, what topics do you think we should explore? And we'll go to ChatGPT or Bing Chat rather, and we'll draft some questions, and then we'll take that content and put it into the platform together so you can see how it works. So go to the chat, give me some ideas. What do we want to make our game about?
Yeah, if people do not submit ideas, then obviously I'm going to suggest that the game is about Taylor Swift. So I suggest that our attendees get instructional design. What a relevant topic that isn't Taylor Swift. Communication. Communication could be a good one.
I like communication.
Something that's helpful for everybody. Or empathy, that's good too.
I kind of want to do empathy because I want to see what Bing Chat tells me about empathy. Yeah, okay, diversity, inclusion, also, these are really common topics that lots of different organizations create training for. Wendy has a question about whether this is a subscription. It is a subscription. I'm not sure, Stephanie, about educator-specific pricing, whether that's something that we've set up for different institutions. Yep.
I don't know off the top of my head, but I can find out. Or perhaps Jen says we do have an education discount.
Cool. That's good. All right, I'm going to stop my share again, and then I am going to pop over to Bing Chat, and I think we are going to go into empathy. That's going to be just my call here. I said I'm very curious to see what we come up with. All right, so I'm pulling up Bing Chat. This prompt will work with any chatbot that you're using for writing purposes. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to share my screen. All right, can everyone see welcome to the new Bing? Just kind of the standard Bing Chat starting screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So if you're building your own course, you're building your own game, you've got your own source content that you want to build a game for, then you don't have to do this first step. But because we're doing this kind of on the fly, I am going to first ask Bing Chat to give me some source content, which I do not recommend as an instructional designer. If you're actually building a course for your organization, you want to work with your own vetted source material. For the demo purposes, I'm just going to ask it to give me some material, and then I'm going to ask it to reference its own results to help build out some of these questions. So I'm just going to do this live so you guys can see exactly what I'm doing. First, I'm going to say, I give me the top 5 tips for cultivating empathy as a listener in conversations. So I'm getting a little more specific than just the topic of empathy because I need, I need Bing Chat to give me some workable material. And I'm just going to see what it comes up with. Okay, so now it's gonna write for a bit. It's gonna, do some thinking. It's gonna give me some source material. Be present, listen actively. These are not necessarily words that are going to fit into a noodle puzzle, right? So I'm going to have to bring things down a little bit. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to use that prompt and that I put on screen a little bit ago and that we will put in chat before the end of the session. And I'm going to ask I'm going to ask Big Chat to rephrase this content in ways that I can use in my game. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm working on a word puzzle game about empathy. Can you summarize the above into 5 words, each of which is 3 to 7 letters long? For each word, explain how the word to the concepts above. Okay, so that's pretty much the same prompts. Slightly different phrasing because I'm asking Bing to work with its own material rather than material that I'm providing to it. But the prompt that we'll give you in chat later on in the session will be set up so that you can basically use it as is. So I'm going to press send. It's going to write for me. And here we go. So now it's giving us, again, really succinct versions of the material that it gave us before. And these are things that we can put right into the Noodle game, with maybe the exception of empathize. So got to double check your words. It doesn't always necessarily get it 100% right, but it's certainly a lot faster and a lot closer than I would have been able to do, I think, if I were doing this right on my own. I'm going to tweak things if I want to. I'm going to I'm going to come up with additional words, but it's a good way to get some brainstorming out there, and it's a good way to get started, especially if you're using games to, just do that reinforcement or build up that curiosity. Okay, so we've got our words. We're going to stop the share again, and I'm going to pivot over to our CMS. So this is what I'm going to show you next. This is going to be the back end that you use for actually creating a game. Oh.
You're still sharing the Bing GPT.
Yeah, it looks like Zoom has frozen on me.
Oh no, that is no good. Well, I can stop your sharing.
Yeah, maybe try that. Maybe that'll shake it out of its funk.
All right. We like to add a little suspense into our webinars. Will the technology work? Will it not?
It's Halloween, right? It's Halloween,
Right.
so suspense is appropriate. I'm going to restart then.
Okay. Yeah, it does. It does look like Ellen is frozen. Zoom decided to be scary in honor of Halloween. While Ellen is restarting, I will remind everyone that we've been posting Noodle of the Day games on our social media. Hopefully you've seen some of those and had a chance to play around with those. Today was our last one. We've been doing Halloween themed ones for the week. All right, Ellen, you are back.
I'm back.
You're also in here twice now.
Oh, that's spooky. But again, appropriate. Okay. So where we left off, I wanted to show you the CMS, right? So we have some content that we can use for our empathy game. Yeah. Oh no. If you guys see anything moving in the background, like something knocking over the plants, definitely let me know. Or maybe don't. Let me know after the webinar. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. one more time. And what we've got here is our CMS. So this is where we are going to be able to create a Noodle game, and we're going to be able to bring in that content that we created really, really quickly.
Ellen, you are muted. It's the
Guys,
goat.
the ghost got me.
Yeah.
Yep, the ghost. All right, so we're going to go to here's our dashboard. I'm going to create a new game, and I'm going to go to Noodle. And here we have basically all the setup information, and we're going to go through this pretty quickly because I want to get to the puzzle creation. But we are going to go through this because if you're creating your own Noodle games, you're going to have to make some decisions, and I want to make sure that you all know what's in here. So save as, this is just your internal name. So I'm going to do empathy, demo game, chef's kiss webinar. This is not what the players will see. This is only for me to keep my own material organized. Add tags. This is another way for you to keep things organized. I have a tag called Ellen Test Game. We also have a tag called Demo, just making those games a little bit easier for us to find. And of course, you do that on your own account. You can change the URL that players will see. So right now it's a very long URL where it says empathy, demo, game, chef's kiss, webinar. We don't want that whole thing. So I'm just going to change it to empathy demo. And looks like that's okay. Nothing like that has been created on this account before. Game start date, you can say no one can play this game until November 5th. Or you can say no one can play this game after November 21st. And you can set those dates here. I'm just going to leave it open-ended for now. Percent of puzzles solved correctly required to pass. So if you have 10 puzzles in your game and you want people to get 6 of them right, then you'd give a 60%. I'm going to leave it open for now. So I'm just going to put it for 0. And there's my dog, not a ghost. That's not a ghost. That's just a dog. And she's not going to help us at all. So I'm just going to ignore her. Leaderboard on the game over screen. Yes, you can add that. You can keep it hidden. And then so on and so forth. If you have a logo, you can upload an image. And then here is where I'm going to put in my game title. Not very imaginative, and that's okay. We can come back in and change it, no problem. So that's all the setup. I'm going to skip ahead of theme puzzle right now and just go to theme. We played with empathy, or we played with the light theme so far. You also can do dark. The player can switch between light and dark on their own, but you can set what the default is. We also have T theme, which has a little bit more kind of atmospheric, ambient elements to it. And I think I'll leave that where it is now. So we can leave that, and that is what players would see. Registration, this has to do with how players log into your game. You can set it the way that I have so that anyone can launch it and anyone can play it. But if you want to leave something open-ended so that people can play it for a longer period of time, you might want to have registration because you don't want any random player coming in playing your game. You might have important information you want to protect in the game. You might not want to include just any random person off the internet in your player count for your subscription costs. Right now, I'm just going to do no authorization. I'm not going to require registration. So that's what I've done. That's set up. Took us 3 minutes. Now we're going to go to our puzzles. For the game that we did earlier on cybersecurity, I didn't randomize the puzzles. So they would have shown up in the same order, same sequence for everybody. And I think that's a little better if you are doing something where people are playing along and then you're also showing the game live, then everyone's kind of looking at the same question at the same time. But if you're sending it out and everyone's playing asynchronously, you might randomize the questions just to make it a little bit more interesting if people want to try again and get a higher score. So I'm going to leave this randomized, and then I'm going to create our first puzzle. So on a separate screen, which you guys can't see, I've got Bing Chat up. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to reference that Bing Chat with the results that we've got, and I'm going to create the first draft of our game lickety split right here. So this first thing, I think focus was our first word. So I'm going to say the answer is focus. And then I am going to take the content that it gave us, kind of that phrase that explained how the word related to the source content, and I'm going to put that as the prompt. So I'm going to say, be present and give your full attention. Feedback, when the puzzle is solved, you can give additional information. You can give a separate piece of information if the player doesn't solve the puzzle. Those are also optional, so I can skip over those right now. When it comes to entering category name, I'm going to say empathy and conversation. That's kind of a long category name, but there's no restriction. And that's it. That's our first puzzle. Puzzle 2. I'll probably put it under the same category. And this is an instance where you probably don't want to use the chat GPT or the Bing chat results as is, because what it gave us was listen actively to understand, not to respond, and the answer was listen. So we generally probably don't want to have the answer word in the prompt. You can just then rephrase something quickly in the chat. And I think that is made, it's a process that's a lot faster if you have a starting point. And I think that's where bringing in AI to your workflow around creating puzzles is really helpful, because it can just speed that process up. Okay, I am going to save my game now. So I have 2 puzzles, and I can expand that to additional number of puzzles. I think we max it out. It's something large, like 14 maybe. I think it's a good number of puzzles that you can fit into a specific game. But all you need is 1 puzzle to save the game, and I've created 2. So at this point, we are ready to publish. And here I have a few different options. So I can embed this into a web page if I wanted to just send people to a web page where there's the daily Noodle, and they just go there and they refresh it. They'd have a new puzzle every day. We could embed that here with the width and the height. It is responsive, so you can play it on any of your devices. You can play it on your laptop, tablet, desktop, or your mobile device. You can launch it just as a website. So you just copy the URL and you can paste it in. That's what I shared with you earlier on in the session. And then here's where we have our SCORM integration. So you can download this game as a SCORM file, load it to your LMS, and launch it from there. And so then what will happen is when the game is launched through the LMS, it will send any relevant player data from players' attempts at the games back to TGA, back to the training arcade, so you can see it in the analytics. Now, there are no analytics yet because we haven't shared this game. There's no leaderboard because we don't have any players yet. But over time, as players go through the game and as they create that data, you'd be able to come back in and see how people are doing on those various puzzles and what's giving them trouble and what they seem to be solving the quickest. Okay, I'm going to pause there for any questions anyone has while we're still looking at the CMS. We've got about 15 minutes left for questions. If you guys want me to click anything or try something, or go back and look at something that you saw in one of the games or in the CMS, now would be a great time to do it, because we're ready to rock on the question. I have a couple of things that we can talk about, I think, in terms of what's coming in the roadmap for this particular product, for this particular game, but we can touch on that before we wrap up today. Any questions coming through on the Q&A panel?
All right, so far, no questions.
Okay.
I think Noodle is pretty easy to build. As I mentioned while you were frozen, I was telling everyone about our Noodle of the Day games that we've been posting on social. And a few of us in marketing built all of those. I didn't even have the benefit of this awesome webinar to teach me how to build a game. Kind of wishing I'd had that chat GPT prompt when I was coming up with my games. So I think that'll make it even faster, which is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it can be a really powerful tool. I know it makes people nervous, but when you're looking at just creating something small every day, I think it can be something that really saves you a little bit of time. It takes a 30-minute task and makes it a 5-minute task. That's helpful for me because then I can go get more coffee and not be
Yes.
in a rush. Yeah. I am curious for the folks who are on today's webinar. I wonder how many of you are actual subscribers to the Training Arcade already, and how many of you are, just checking it out, looking to see what it's all about. Who is
Yeah.
already a subscriber?
Let us know in the chat if you're already using the Training Arcade or if this is your first introduction to it. Or if you just want to keep that information anonymous. All right, so we've got, looks like a few people are just checking it out.
Cool. Well, welcome. I'm glad that we could give you a nice little tour.
Should we mention perhaps a few of the other game styles and um, types that we have in the Training Arcade for
Yeah,
those
I think
friends?
that's a good thing to do right now. And I think the other reason though that's a good thing to do, partly because we have some people who are new to the platform on the call, but also because Noodle, if it's a square peg and you've got a round hole, you don't need to make it fit, right? There are other options. If you do want to do something that's game based, um, or gamified, then you have additional games that you can create. So sometimes if your words are really long and you just can't make it work in a noodle puzzle, no matter how many times you run it through Chat GPT, how many people you ask for different phrasings, or how many times you try to tweak the wording, it just doesn't fit, then use a different game. So we have this many games. Actually, I think this this one is not one that you can do. I think 5S is not one that you can do because these are actually custom games. And the only reason you're seeing them on the list right now is because we're looking at my like super user TGA dev account. But we have flashcards, we have a jump game that's kind of a platformer game. There's Noodle. Scenarios is a branching scenario creator. Sort It helps you kind of sort things into categories. Detective, kind of self-explanatory. For words that are longer than the 7 letters that Noodle allows, you might do something like Jeopardy, you might do something like Scramble, or even Trivia. So these are all games that you get with the Trading Arcade subscription. And I think I mentioned earlier, one of the things I think games are underutilized for is to prepare people for a learning experience rather than having it as a knowledge check. And so you can imagine maybe before your first day in training, you send people a noodle puzzle or a noodle game that has 5 puzzles in it before, and then at the end of the day, before dinner, you remind everyone that there's going to be a new game. And so then before they come to the training session the following day, you send them something like Match or Recall or Scramble. So you give them a totally different game mechanic to work with. It keeps things fresh, but you're again still using it to engage people kind of on a regular basis and get them mentally warmed up before they really come in and start doing the work of learning. But yeah, so these are all the different mechanics we have. Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, I think, are some of our more popular, most popular ones. Jeopardy is I think it's the only licensed version of Jeopardy for educational purposes. And it's a really great way to build up some instructor-led or even asynchronous gameplay with something familiar. So yeah, we've got a lot more. I don't want to necessarily jump into these right now because I
That's
don't
a
have
whole
any,
nother
a
webinar for
whole
each
other
of
webinar.
those.
And yeah, I would be stumbling around because when you creating a game for a webinar, I could do that. Creating a whole game from scratch is definitely a little bit more of like, you don't want to see the sausage being made, because it's mostly just me talking to myself. But yeah,
Post a
there are
link
demo games
in
for
the
all of those
chat.
if you want to take a look around our website, and Stephanie might share some resources where people
Yes.
can get more
So if
information.
you want to see the Jeopardy game in action, we are doing a live one. We do these every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern, and we play it so you can kind of see how it works in a multiplayer, live, virtual, instructor-led multiplayer format, uh, with clues from actual past Jeopardy shows. So the link to that, if you want to join, is in the chat. And as Ellen said, we do have demos of all the games on our website. And last but not least, we do have a free trial. So if you're intrigued, but you're not quite sure how it would work for you, you can sign up for the free trial and check it out there.
So I have just two more things. I think one of the last pieces I want to say is some of the things we're looking at for Noodle and the training arcade as a whole in the roadmap for the next 6 to 18 months. We're enhancing the game creation experience, but we have the option of making it a little bit more fun. We're going to, I think I mentioned, look into creating performance and data and tracking by category, not just by question. Some additional options for visual customization. So it's not just tea theme, light theme, and dark theme, but we're looking at ways that you can kind of customize your color palette, perhaps. And then, of course, everyone's talking about this chatbot integration. Now, I think it's pretty easy to just have a chatbot open in one tab and then you have your game maker open in the other. But we want to make it as easy as possible for you to play around with the games and to get them in your classrooms or your training programs or however you see fit to use them. So that is something that we're exploring as well. Okay, without further ado, let me get that chat bot prompt into the Zoom chat for you all. And this is just as is. So grab that, paste it into your favorite word processor and save it for later use. And then whenever you're ready to come up with some puzzles, just tweak it the way that you need it to be. And you'll get your brainstorming started. And within a few minutes, hopefully you'll have a game.
Awesome. That is fantastic. You can probably apply that to lots of other things that you're working on too.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, it looks like we don't have any more questions. If you do have questions, obviously you can always feel free to reach out to eLearning or the game agency on social media or through our support channels. And Ellen's putting her contact in there as well, so you can reach out to her, connect with her on LinkedIn. We did record this, like I said, so we'll be sending an email out to everyone with the recording and another link to the free trial if you want to check that out. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and thank you, Ellen, for taking the time to show us this today. Hopefully everybody has a great rest of your day. We'll see you all on another webinar soon.